as you're listening to the story or reading along for yourself, you're going to come across some words that are pretty unfamiliar. There's a lot of pretty foreign words and made-up words and hard to pronounce words. I'm going to try and go over a few that are early on in the story here, just to try and clarify things, give a little backstory to them, just make it a little less confusing. I know some of the grander stories like Tolkien's work and George R.R. Martin, they're really big, famous works that I'm nowhere near trying to put myself on the same level as them. I'm just equating that there's a lot of pretty thick words to get through in their works, and I'm just saying this is kind of similar. When you're doing some kind of fantasy, you're going to have to go over a lot of races and locations and like a god hierarchy and things like that, social castes, names of attacks and abilities and weapons, just a lot of things that are gonna come across real foreign real quickly. So I'm gonna go over a few of those right now and try to just make it easier. The first word in the story that's gonna come across as foreign probably is Captain Rivius and Averno. Captain Rivius is one of the Sicarii from the world Averno. It's kind of like an alternate dimension to this version of Earth, and the Sicarii are they're humanoid in appearance and function. They reproduce the same as humans, but they look a little different. Different colors. They have horns. Some can have wings. They're a lot stronger and more ferocious and less emotional than humans. They're pretty cold and calculating for the most part. Very warlike. It's in their nature to conquer and spread destruction and take slaves and kill and just inflict fear on the people that they bring war to. They have a very caste society. You've got, a king, and below them is the military officers and generals, and then the military itself, and then just below the military is pretty much the rest of the people. And there's different tribes, which I would say is similar to our different races of humans, or ethnicities, I guess is the better way to say it, since the human race is a single species. So too are the tribes of the Sicarii. They're the same species, but there's just different ethnicities, different tribes of them. Most of them are geographically separated, and a lot of their differences come from the locale where they live. It kind of shapes how they're formed and how they look, how they act, how their society is formed. So in these stories, I've established that you have humanity. This is set in an ancient time in an alternate version of this Earth. So some of the historical events are going to be slightly different. It takes place a lot further back than what most history accepts as where things were started. Kind of similar to like the old Conan stories where Hyperborea and all those places were set much, much further back than even ancient Sumeria and Babylonia and all those time periods. So, in addition to the Sicarii and humans in the story, we're also introduced to beings called the Yazata. The Yazata are... The name comes from a Zoroastrian word, which is like an ancient pre-Christian version of angels. So the Yazata function basically as angelic beings in these stories. Very similar to like all of the different cultures, versions of angels all kind of rolled up in one. They're also pretty warlike, but they have a caste society as well, so there's some that are scholars and more focused on collecting records and observing. That comes into the Hashmalim, which are also mentioned pretty briefly in this first chapter. As Enkidu, he refers to a Master Hoyles, one of the Yazata. Master Hoyles is a Hashmalim Yazata, which function as watchers. They're assigned with different species, several different worlds, and they're there to observe. They watch those species, make sure they don't destroy themselves. Rarely they will train one of the beings to better protect their species. They're supposed to not get involved, but they can train a being to prevent from extinction level events. Because what use is there watching a species if the species is about to be destroyed completely? So there's a little bit of leeway in their rules. But yeah, the Hashmalim are the Watcher Yazata, the Watcher Angels. But above them, there are also warrior castes. We refer to those as the Seraphim, which is also based on, the Christian word. But these are like the archangels. These are the warriors. And each of the Seraphim units, they're referred to as choirs in the story. So each of these military units is led by an arche, a general. And most of these are also called the Serim. They are princes, like the highest ranking Yazata. So that's how most of them are organized. We're also early introduced to some different locations. Now, the locations are meant to be kind of ambiguous, somewhere in the Middle East, but not being able to actually pinpoint the location. I know a lot of fiction does it like that, where you make up a town name. It's like anywhere USA or something like that, and capital city, and wherever, metropolis, places like that, because you want to base it on a real location, but not actually have that location. So that's where I'm going with Katal Takuk and Dwarka, Levant, Benares. I'm going to make they're kind of a Middle Eastern area, ancient Sumeria kind of locations, but no specific location for them. The last thing I'm going to go over in this little explanation video to try and clear up some of the confusing names and just all of the history that's thrown in pretty quickly in this short chapter here. Are some of the characters. We're introduced to Enkidu Hyalura, for at this point of the time is going to be our protagonist. He's a warrior priest for Kataltakuk, and we're seeing that he has a little bit of a troubled past with his own kinsman Iyasan. Apparently he got a little intimate with Iyasan's his betrothed, and that caused some issues in the family. This woman was named Taraxime, and she's also from the city of Dwarka, which is, as Enkidu puts it in the story, a pretty immoral place. It's several days' journey away from Kataltakuk, and it's a much larger city, much more pagan, much more free with its rules, and not nearly as focused on any kind of monotheistic religion. There's many gods and many rituals and many ceremonies and celebrations that go on in Dwarka. And Taraxime, she belongs to the Erede clan, which are kind of a noble family of that city, and they don't particularly take too kindly to Enkidu's visit to the city and collecting Taraxime and Iyasan's son Galen and bringing him back to Kataltakuk so that he's not raised in the ways of the serpent, which is the patron god of the city and of the Erede clan. And so Enkidu comes back to the city with Galen. The Erede clan is in pursuit, and Enkidu meets up with his former priest mentor, Fausto, who's quit the priesthood and become a drunkard. And there's some history there that hasn't been brought out yet, how Fausto seems to be disillusioned with the faith and with the priesthood. And then the other characters that we've been introduced to so far are members of the Sakari, which is Captain Rivius, and he's the leader of the scouting expedition of this invasion of the human world. And it's mentioned that he is leading a group of mostly conscripts and criminals. This is because King Marduk of the Sakari didn't really find it worth his time to potentially sacrifice large members of his military if the human strength of their cities is too great and the casualties would be too great. Rivius also mentions the 4 generals. These are the 4 leaders of King Marduk's army. And he mentions 2 of them by name, Yamura and Hui. And they're going to be integral to the story, obviously, since Yamura is, the namesake of this book. The 4 generals are Yamura, Hui, and then we'll be introduced to 2 others pretty soon. So I think that pretty much goes over everything to kind of be up to date on this first chapter. I recommend just kind of refreshing some of these names, otherwise it's going to get pretty confusing as you listen. And alright, I'm going to work on uploading the next chapter. Thanks for listening.